Are you able to authorize and start getting some,
What if I told you that a single phone call at 8:48 a.m. on May 2nd would expose the darkest family secret imaginable? What if the person you trusted most with your children's lives was the very person who made them disappear? This isn't just another missing children case. This is the story of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, two innocent souls whose vanishing would tear apart everything we thought we knew about maternal love, family loyalty, and the lengths someone will go to keep their secrets buried. Before we dive into this haunting mystery, I need you to subscribe right now. Because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you believe about missing children cases, and you won't want to miss a single detail of this unfolding nightmare. Picture this. Jamie Mackenzie, a step-grandmother, was supposed to be away that morning. Instead, fate kept her home, dozing on the phone with her brother at exactly 8:48 a.m. What she heard next would haunt her forever. First, the frantic barking of her dog, piercing through her sleepy haze. Then, cutting through the morning air like a knife, she heard it, Lily's voice. But this wasn't a cry for help. It was what Jamie would later describe as Lily's gleeful scream, that distinctive birthday scream that 6-year-old Lily was known for. Then came Jack's voice, for years old and full of life, saying something she couldn't quite make out. And then silence. A silence so complete, so sudden, that it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Jamie's eyes snapped open. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. She stumbled outside, her heart already racing, expecting to see two children playing in the yard where their voices had just been. Instead, she found Malaya Brooks Murray, their mother, standing in the driveway. Malaya was holding baby Meadow, seemingly calm, staring at her phone. "Where are the kids?" Jamie demanded, her voice trembling with a fear she couldn't yet name. Malaya looked up, and for a moment, Jamie saw something in her eyes that would replay in her nightmares for months to come. A look of what? Guilt? Fear? Or something far more sinister? "They're in the woods," Malaya said, her voice flat, emotionless. But here's what makes this case so bone-chilling. By Jamie's calculation, 20 minutes had already passed since she'd heard those voices. 20 minutes of silence. 20 minutes where two small children had supposedly wandered into dense woodland without a single sound. In missing children cases, those first minutes are everything. They're the difference between a happy reunion and a family destroyed forever. But what happens when those first minutes are built on lies? What Jamie didn't know in that moment was that she had just become the key witness in what would become one of the most controversial missing children cases in recent memory. Her testimony would expose a web of deception so intricate, so carefully constructed, that it would take months to unravel. Because Lilly and Jack Sullivan didn't just disappear. According to mounting evidence, they were disappeared. And the person responsible might be the one person who should have protected them above all others, their own mother. The question that haunts everyone who knows this case is simple yet terrifying. What kind of mother orchestrates the disappearance of her own children? And perhaps more importantly, are Lilly and Jack Sullivan still alive? Stay with me, because the answers to these questions will shake you to your core. The official story seemed straightforward enough. Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, claimed he woke up that morning to find Lilly and Jack missing from their beds. He said he called out for them, searched the house, then began frantically scouring the property when they didn't respond. But Jamie's testimony shattered this narrative like glass against concrete. You see, Daniel claimed he discovered the children missing and immediately began his frantic search. But if Jamie heard the children at 8:48 a.m. and Daniel was supposedly asleep at that time, then someone is lying. And in a case involving missing children, lies aren't just deceptive, they're deadly. Let's reconstruct what really happened that morning, piece by piece. At 8:48 a.m., Jamie was on the phone with her brother, drifting in and out of sleep. The timing is precise because phone records don't lie. At that exact moment, she heard her dog begin barking frantically, the kind of barking that means something is seriously wrong. Then came those voices. Lily's distinctive scream, not of terror, but of excitement. The kind of sound a 6-year-old makes when something thrilling is happening. Jack's voice followed, though his words were unclear from Jamie's distance. Here's what makes this so chilling. Both children sounded happy. There was no fear in their voices, no cries for help. They trusted whoever was with them completely. Then nothing. An abrupt, unnatural silence that stretched for 20 long minutes before Jamie finally emerged to find Malaya in the driveway. When confronted about the children's whereabouts, Malaya's response was immediate. "They're in the woods." Not "I don't know where they are." Not "I'm looking for them." She directed Jamie to search the woods with absolute certainty, as if she knew exactly where they should be. But here's the problem with that response. If Malaya genuinely believed her children had wandered into the woods, why wasn't she searching? Why was she standing calmly in the driveway, phone in hand, baby Meadow in her arms, while her two older children were supposedly lost in dangerous woodland? Any parent who's ever lost sight of their child for even 30 seconds knows the primal panic that sets in. Your heart races, your vision tunnels, and every fiber of your being focuses on one thing: finding your child. You don't stand calmly. You don't check your phone. You search with every ounce of strength you have. Malaya's calm demeanor wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. Unless, of course, she knew exactly where Lilly and Jack were. The timeline discrepancy between Daniel's version and Jamie's eyewitness account creates a 20-minute window that changes everything. 20 minutes, where someone had complete access to two trusting children. 20 minutes that would determine whether this was a tragic accident or something far more sinister. But the contradictions don't end there. When police arrived and began interviewing the family, they were told something that should have immediately raised red flags. The family stated, with absolute certainty, "We don't think the kids crossed that road." Think about that statement. How could they be so sure? If two children had genuinely wandered off, their direction would be completely unpredictable. Children don't follow logic when they explore, they follow curiosity. They might head toward water, toward interesting sounds, or simply in whatever direction catches their fancy. Yet this family was certain the children hadn't crossed the road.
Why?
What did they know that they weren't sharing with investigators? The answer to that question would soon become apparent, but not in the way anyone expected. As the morning wore on and the search began in earnest, investigators made their first disturbing discovery. In the household garbage, they found half of Lily's pink blanket. Not lost, not misplaced, deliberately discarded. Who throws away half of a missing child's blanket? And more importantly, where was the other half? The search teams would soon find out, and what they discovered would prove that this case was never about two children who wandered off into the woods. This was about something much darker, much more calculated, and much more heartbreaking. Because sometimes, the monsters we should fear most aren't strangers lurking in the shadows. Sometimes, they're the people who kiss us goodnight and promise to keep us safe forever. When word spread that two young children were missing, the community response was immediate and overwhelming. Volunteers arrived by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Professional search and rescue teams mobilized. Helicopters circled overhead. The massive operation that unfolded was both heartwarming in its community spirit and heartbreaking in its necessity. For 5 solid days, from May 2nd to May 7th, the search ran around the clock. Professional searchers, trained volunteers, and desperate family members combed through every inch of woodland, every creek bed, every abandoned structure within miles of the Sullivan home. But what they found wasn't what anyone expected. The second piece of Lily's pink blanket was discovered tangled in a tree branch off a remote road. Not tucked away by accident, not caught by wind or chance. It was positioned in a way that seemed almost deliberate, as if someone wanted it to be found. Near that blanket fragment, investigators made another discovery that should have immediately changed the entire direction of the investigation: a child-sized boot print in the mud. Here's what makes this boot print so significant. It was isolated. There were no adult prints nearby, no trail leading to or from it. Just one small print, perfectly preserved, exactly where someone might place it if they wanted searchers to find it. The evidence was speaking, but no one was listening to what it was really saying. When investigators process a scene, they look for patterns. They look for evidence chains that tell a story. In genuine cases where children wander off, you find scattered evidence, a trail of small belongings, multiple footprints showing confusion or play, signs of children being children. But the evidence in this case was too clean, too convenient, too perfectly placed. Half a blanket in the household trash. The other half positioned where searchers would find it. A single boot print with no supporting evidence around it. This wasn't the chaotic scatter of lost children. This was the careful placement of someone trying to create a narrative. But the most damning piece of evidence wasn't what they found, it was what they didn't find. In cases where children genuinely wander into woodland, they leave traces. Broken branches at child height where they push through undergrowth. Disturbed leaf litter. Small pieces of clothing caught on thorns. The natural evidence of small bodies moving through wild spaces. None of that existed here. Professional trackers, people who can follow week-old animal trails through dense forest, found nothing. No bent grass where small feet had walked. No displaced stones from a creek crossing. No sign whatsoever that two children had ever entered those woods. The searchers were looking for children who had never been there. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the search was the family's behavior throughout. While hundreds of volunteers gave up their days, their sleep, their comfort to search for Lilly and Jack, the children's own mother was notably absent. Malaya didn't join the search parties. She didn't coordinate with volunteers. She didn't make emotional pleas to the media for her children's return. Instead, she retreated into silence, a silence that would become more deafening with each passing day. When desperate families organize searches for missing children, they become the focal point of hope and desperation. They coordinate volunteers, speak to media, follow up on every lead, no matter how remote. They don't sleep, they barely eat, and they certainly don't disappear from public view. Malaya's absence from her own children's search wasn't just unusual, it was impossible to explain through any normal parental response to crisis. As the days wore on and no trace of the children emerged, the RCMP made a decision that probably saved valuable resources, but revealed their growing doubts about the official story. On May 7th, they scaled back the massive search operation. You don't scale back a search for missing children unless you believe they're not where you're looking. And increasingly, the evidence suggested that Lilly and Jack Sullivan had never been in those woods at all. The community didn't give up. Volunteers continued searching on their own, driven by hope and heartbreak in equal measure. But as May turned toward June, a different kind of investigation was beginning behind the scenes. Because sometimes, the evidence tells you everything you need to know about a case. And in this case, the evidence was screaming a truth that no one wanted to hear. Someone had deliberately staged a disappearance. Someone had carefully planted evidence to misdirect the investigation. And someone had done it with intimate knowledge of exactly how missing children cases unfold. The question was no longer where Lilly and Jack had gone. The question was who had made them disappear and why. The answer to that question would shatter a family and expose secrets that some people would kill to keep hidden. In missing children cases, there's a predictable pattern to how parents behave. They become media magnets, desperately sharing their children's photos, begging for information, offering rewards. They organize search parties, coordinate with volunteers, and maintain visible, constant pressure on investigators to never give up. They do everything except stay silent. But Malaya Brooks Murray chose silence. And in that silence, she spoke volumes about what she knew. Within days of her children's disappearance, Malaya deactivated all her social media accounts. No more Facebook posts, no Twitter updates, no Instagram stories. For a generation that lives their lives online, this digital silence was as jarring as if she had simply vanished herself. When reporters approached her for interviews, she refused. When volunteers wanted to coordinate search efforts, she was unavailable. When investigators needed clarification on timeline details, she provided the bare minimum and nothing more. This wasn't the behavior of a grieving mother. This was the behavior of someone who knew exactly where her children were and couldn't risk saying too much. But Malaya's silence extended beyond just media avoidance. According to multiple sources, she began making preparations that seemed less like grief and more like an escape plan. Days after Lilly and Jack's disappearance, Malaya abandoned the family home entirely. She didn't just avoid the property where painful memories might linger, she fled it completely, leaving behind the only physical connection to her missing children. Think about that decision. Your children vanish from your home, and your response is to abandon that home entirely? What if they found their way back? What if they were scared and looking for the safety of familiar surroundings? What if investigators needed to process the scene again? A truly desperate parent would never leave. They would turn that home into a shrine, a command center, a beacon of hope that their children might somehow find their way back to safety. Malaya's abandonment of the family home wasn't just unusual, it was strategic. And that strategy would soon become clearer as more details emerged about what was really happening behind the scenes. The key to understanding Malaya's behavior lies in something that happened months before May 2nd, something that would explain the fear that drove her to make the most desperate decision a mother could make. Child Protective Services had opened a file on Lilly and Jack Sullivan. The details of CPS involvement are usually kept confidential, but multiple sources confirmed that the agency had been monitoring the family over developmental concerns. Social workers had been to the home. Assessments had been conducted. A file existed that could potentially result in the removal of both children from their mother's custody. For any parent, CPS involvement is terrifying. But for someone already struggling with the complexities of a blended family, someone dealing with whatever challenges had triggered the original concerns, that involvement represents an existential threat to everything they hold dear. Did Malaya look at that CPS file and see her future written in bureaucratic language? Did she envision a scenario where social workers would arrive one morning and simply take her children away, placing them in foster care, while she fought a legal battle she might not win? The timing suggests she did. The CPS file was active. Social workers were monitoring the situation. And then, suddenly, there were no children to monitor anymore. But orchestrating the disappearance of 2 children requires help. It requires planning, resources, and people willing to risk everything to assist in what would legally constitute kidnapping. According to family sources, Malaya didn't act alone. And the person who helped her would soon come forward with claims so explosive that they would change the entire trajectory of the case. Because sometimes, the truth comes from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes, that truth is more disturbing than any fiction we could imagine. As we dig deeper into this case, one question becomes impossible to ignore. If you believed the government was going to take your children away, how far would you go to stop them? And if you did go that far, could you live with the consequences? Malaya's silence suggests she's still trying to answer those questions herself. Every missing children case has that one moment when everything changes. When a single revelation transforms a search and rescue operation into something much darker and more complex. For the Lilly and Jack Sullivan case, that moment came when Darren Getty decided to speak. Darren wasn't just another concerned community member following the case from a distance. He was family, a cousin with intimate knowledge of the personalities, relationships, and secrets that defined the Sullivan household. And what he had to say would shatter every assumption about what happened on May 2nd. On the Crime and Shame YouTube channel, Darren made a statement so explosive that it immediately divided everyone following the case. He claimed, with absolute certainty, that he knew exactly where Lilly and Jack Sullivan were. They were alive. They were safe. And they weren't even in Nova Scotia anymore. According to Darren, the children had been secretly relocated to New Brunswick, where they were being cared for by members of Malaya's extended Native community. This wasn't a kidnapping in the traditional sense. It was a carefully orchestrated rescue mission designed to keep the children safe from what Malaya perceived as an imminent threat from Child Protective Services. But Darren's claims went far beyond just revealing the children's location. He painted a picture of a conspiracy that involved multiple family members, careful planning, and a cover-up that extended to the very people who were supposedly helping search for the missing children. According to Darren's version of events, Daniel Martel wasn't just a heartbroken stepfather frantically searching for his missing children. He was an active participant in the deception, deliberately lying about timelines to give Malaya and her accomplices the head start they needed to get the children safely out of the province. Think about what this means. If Darren is telling the truth, then every tearful interview Daniel gave to the media was a performance. Every time he promised to search forever for Lilly and Jack, he already knew exactly where they were. Every moment he stood before cameras begging for his children's return was a calculated lie designed to maintain the facade of a desperate family. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Darren's claims was his assertion about his own role in the disappearance. According to his statements to the Major Crimes Unit, he wasn't just a family member who figured out what happened after the fact. He was actively involved in planning and executing the children's removal. This revelation transforms everything about how we understand this case. If Darren is telling the truth, then this wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was a premeditated conspiracy involving multiple adults, careful timing, and months of preparation. But why would Darren expose his own involvement in what amounts to kidnapping? Why risk criminal charges by admitting to investigators that he helped orchestrate the children's disappearance? The answer lies in the mounting pressure of the investigation and the realization that the truth was going to come out anyway. By coming forward proactively, Darren positioned himself as someone trying to help investigators understand what really happened, rather than as a criminal trying to hide his involvement. But his cooperation came with a price. According to his statements, the children's relocation wasn't just about avoiding CPS intervention. It was about protecting them from something far more immediate and dangerous. Darren claimed that Malaya had become convinced that the children were in physical danger if they remained in their current situation. Whether that danger was real or imagined, whether it was based on legitimate concerns or paranoid delusions, Malaya believed it with enough conviction to risk everything to protect her children. But here's what makes Darren's claims so difficult to process. If the children really were in danger, why not work within the system? Why not cooperate with CPS to address whatever concerns existed? Why choose the nuclear option of making the children disappear entirely? The answer to those questions lies in the complex psychology of a mother who believed she was out of options. A mother who saw the system as the enemy rather than a potential ally. A mother who was willing to sacrifice her own freedom, her relationship with her partner, and her entire life as she knew it to keep her children safe from what she perceived as an imminent threat. But there's another possibility that investigators had to consider. What if Darren's claims were just another layer of deception? What if his story about living children safely relocated to New Brunswick was designed to cover up something far more sinister? Because in cases like this, hope can be weaponized. The possibility that the children are alive somewhere can be used to misdirect investigations, waste resources, and buy time for evidence to disappear. As investigators worked to verify Darren's claims, they would soon discover evidence that either supported his story or revealed it as an elaborate fabrication designed to hide the darkest truth of all.